Hi, Dr. Ron here, and I want to invite you to join our Unstress Health community. Now, like this podcast, it's independent of industry and focuses on taking a holistic approach to human health and to the health of the planet. The two are inseparable. There are so many resources available with membership, including regular live Q&As on specific topics with special guests, including many with our amazing Unstress Health Advisory Panel. Now, we've done hundreds of podcasts, all worth listening to, with some amazing experts on a wide range of topics. Many are world leaders. But with membership, we have our Unstress Lab podcast series, where we take the best of several guests and carefully curate specific topics for episodes which are jam-packed full of valuable insights. So join the Unstress Health community. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, click on the link below or just visit unstresshealth.com to see what's on offer and join now. I look forward to connecting with you. Hello and welcome to Unstress. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Well, today my guest is Ian Westmoreland, and Ian has been recognised in Australia, received an Order of Australia, which is an Australian honour that recognises Australian citizens and other persons for outstanding achievement and service. And that certainly describes Ian. He has dedicated certainly the last 10, 15 years of his life, maybe more, to servicing and supporting, particularly men. He initiated a program called Mentoring Men, and it's rather sobering to know in a recent report from the Australian government that suicide, for example, is the 16th most common cause of death across all of us, but there continues to be a large difference between the sexes. More than 3/4 of people who died were men, making it the 11th most common cause for men. And the median age is rather disturbingly 45.8 years. So, yes, we do focus a lot on women's health and children's health and family health, but men's health is our focus today on one level. Another initiative that Ian is very passionate and has started is something called Kintsugi Heroes. And Kintsugi is, well, I won't spoil it. It's a way of putting together things that are broken, but it's a much more eloquently described thing that Ian talks about in this program. Look, Ian is a legend. I think he's so inspiring. I was so looking forward to catching up with him and hearing some of these wonderful and really important initiatives. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Ian Westmoreland. Welcome to the show, Ian.
G'day, Ron.
Ian, we were introduced a month or two ago, and I've been so looking forward to this conversation. And when we were introduced, I was frankly blown away by the number of things that you are not only passionate about, but the effect that passion has on so many other people. We're going to be talking about mentoring men. We're going to be talking about Kintsugi Heroes. But I'm really interested in you at this point and say, what's driven you to this kind of passionate approach?
Great question. Let me share a little bit of my background. I'm not qualified in anything formally, a lot of lived experience, but I worked in the commercial world for over 40 years and managed to work my way into fairly well-paid positions as an IT manager. So I worked in Melbourne for 20 plus years and then a couple of years in New Zealand and then came to Sydney where I am now. And we went from being relatively poor and me trying to support my wife and 4 kids to relatively well off. And in 2013, I started to increasingly think there's more to life than just making money and delivering software changes. And then on the 10th of September 2013, I got on the train to come to work and I continued to read a book that my youngest daughter had given me. And what I read that morning on the train transformed the thinking for the next stage of my life to the point where in May 2014, I quit paid work. So I've been a full-time volunteer since then. So that's at the time of recording. That's over 10 years. And I felt led down a path. I felt I found my purpose. I found my mission. And that's been an evolving, amazing journey, which I've incredibly educational for me. I like to think there's a new improved Ian, which is much better than the original Ian at the start of that journey. So, and that journey continues. I still living the dream.
Well, what was the book?
I get asked that a lot, Ryan, and I always preface it by saying everything I do, whether it be through mentoring men or Kintsugi heroes, I don't care what the culture, beliefs, background, none of those things matter to me. In my own case, I'm a Christian, and what I read was a Christian a book that basically questioned the purpose or role of us Christians, what we should be doing with our life. And what I read that day resonated so strongly with me, and there's a clear reason why it resonated with me, which I can explain. But it was a message for me, and that was the first of a bunch of things along this journey where people have come into my life and influenced it all the way through, even to this conversation here.
Mm-hmm. What's been the biggest lesson you've learnt along that way?
How judgmental, I guess I was. It was, the people really wanted employment, they could find it, and I realised that wasn't right. Possibly homophobic in some cases, and I would never say I was racist. In fact, I think I'm probably now the least racist person I know. But there were elements just around misunderstanding, how to support someone who's got cancer, or how to talk to someone with a disability, how to when someone's grieving, what to do, what to say. So there's been all these lessons as we've covered and met people from a broad range of backgrounds with a broad range of experiences. I've learned from every one of those interactions. They've been my teachers.
Mm. Yeah, I guess. I've only been. Well, I think we have a similar age, and you maybe a little bit, maybe have a few months on me. But after all this time, I think it's fair to say that the more I learn, the more I realise I don't know, and that is exciting. I mean, to many people, they love certainty, they crave certainty, they must have certainty. But there's something about not knowing and finding out that is incredibly empowering, isn't it?
I think we should never stop learning. And yeah. Every day I learn new things. And I think that's really important. One of the challenges I see with the world, and social media drives this, people take a position on something, whether it be immigration or whatever, and they're so entrenched in that position. And what I like to do, I have a model where there's a wire that almost but doesn't quite reach two extreme points. So positive, negative, yes, no, right, wrong, whatever. And as we have these conversations, we hear information, and we may move that bead along one way or another, but that it encourages this openness to learn. But there are some people that they are so entrenched to either extreme, they would never consider any information. You could say to them, what information would you need to hear before you changed your position? Let's say it's climate change. And you'd hear there's nothing you can say that would change. And we meet these people, and unfortunately what social media does, we start to associate with people who not only agree with our initial thoughts, they push us further left or further right, and we just lose this. We've lost this meaningful dialogue and this respectful discussion around different points of view, and it's incredibly sad. It's incredibly sad. So I think if these people had a mind that was open to being educated or hearing a different view, the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But your passion for helping people has, over these last 10 years, of course, has been recognised. You are an OA, an order of the, what does that stand for? Order of the Australian.
Well, I tell people it's an old angry man, but it's I think it's the Order of Australia Medal.
Yes, and so it has been recognised, and two of the things that I know have been involved in is, as we said, mentoring men and Kintsugi heroes, and we want to talk about both of those. Tell us about mentoring men, because I think we'd both agree that being a man is challenging for many reasons, and this is probably many of those reasons have driven you to start mentoring men. But tell us about mentoring men.
Well, probably first I'll just share why I started it. And I mentioned after I had this life-changing moment on the train, I felt led and started mentoring kids in Sydney high schools. And I was mentoring at multiple schools. Then I started mentoring in primary schools as well, and then actually became a coordinator for another family mentoring program. So I was actively involved as a volunteer in 3 mentoring programs. And then in one of the Sydney high schools, I was mentoring a young guy, and in our discussion, he shared with me that his father had suicided. His mum was an addict who was in and out of rehab. He was living with his grandparents, which he hated. And then he just turned and he looked me in the eyes and he started crying. And he said, "Ian, help me." And one of the things I've learned is I have a lot of empathy, which can be good, maybe sometimes not good. After the mentoring session finished, I debriefed with the program counsellor and shared, like everything's confidential other than what you share with the counsellor. And I shared what was going on and looking for advice. And she surprised me. She said, "Ian, are you okay?" And I just started crying myself over the situation. And I was flat for about 2 or 3 months. I couldn't work out why. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, I'm slow on the uptake, I wanted to have a mentor just like all these kids I've been mentoring. I should clarify, mentoring is such a broad term. For most people in business, they assume it's someone with acquired skills, knowledge and experience who guides, directs, advises someone else. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I was providing, what I was looking for is life mentoring. And it's predominantly listening, and it's supporting, and it's encouraging. So I did a Google search to look around for my nearest life mentoring organisation for men, and there was nothing, nothing suitable. And as a demographic, we probably struggle more than most other demographics. So it motivated me to start mentoring men, and there was an encounter with our local federal MP, amazing Julian Lisa, who's been a huge supporter. I went to an event he put on. He partnered with Lifeline to promote this suicide prevention course. And he got up at the event and shared about the suicide of his father over 20 years earlier and how he missed the signs and how this course was so important to him. And look, I don't know why. I went to that thing. I'd never met him. I had a manila folder with my proposal to establish mentoring men, like a weird thing to do. As soon as he finished speaking, I made a beeline for him. He saw me coming. And I said, "Julian," I told him the impact his talk had had on me. I said, "Where was the support that could have helped prevent your father from suiciding?" I started telling him about mentoring men, and he was fully on board. He said, "Ian, come and talk to me in my office." Went and saw him. He signed on as our ambassador. He officially launched Mentoring Men at the Asquith Golf Club in November 2018. And now for the next coming up to 6 years, he's been an amazing support. He got us to Canberra. He's introduced us to a number of players, and he continues to be a fantastic support. So just briefly, Mentoring Men is a free program. We train up volunteer men like me who support other men going through life challenges, job loss, relationship breakdown, loneliness, isolation, anything at all. The support is through a long-term, one-to-one mentoring relationship. So through that relationship, trust builds and men start to feel encouraged to have that superpower of vulnerability, openness, because there's trust there. It's incredibly therapeutic when you start talking about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and know that you're being heard, know that you're not being judged. It's an amazing experience. So it's continued on. I stepped aside as a CEO at the end of 2021. But many thousands of men have engaged. I'm confident that hundreds of thousands of men will engage in this program. So we run this amazing facilitation workshop. We still run suicide prevention training that Julian Lisa had encouraged us at that time. We run a bunch of things to help the men continue to connect. We run peer support groups. So it's very much a grassroots organisation. And the relationships that I've developed through that have just been amazing. It's all part of the education journey and the feedback we get from that program yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that you should relate this story of you as high school talking to a young teenager, I'm guessing, who breaks down and cries and feels very vulnerable. And there you were, probably, I'm guessing, in your 50s or 60s, walking away and relating to your mentor, your own mentor or counsellor, and feeling similarly emotional. So here we have the teenager and the adult similarly breaking down. There's something about men and a stigma around vulnerability that doesn't set us up for much for that kind of emotional regulation, does it?
Yeah, I wonder what this is. Is it like if you ask most people what a real man is, you probably get a cross between, James Bond, Indiana Jones, and Clint Eastwood, this tough guy. And I reflect back, my dad used to take me and my two brothers and some of his mates and their sons, and we go camping in the Stresleckis in the Gippsland area of Victoria. And it was all about guns and shooting and killing. And I remember one of my dad's mates, he'd lie on his back with a 303, very powerful rifle, and he'd be trying to shoot wedge-tailed eagles out of the sky, which I just love watching these birds soar. And they would go spotlighting of a night, and I guess I would have been about 10, and I hated it. And as a 10-year-old, while they went out of a nighttime, I would just stay back in the tent, querying, what sort of man am I? Why don't I want to go out and kill things? And I guess the new improved Ian, it's totally fine. It's okay if you don't want to go out and shoot and kill things, but we sort of go down this. We're educated through, I don't know, through the media, through films or whatever, that we've got to behave in a certain way. And now I'm far more comfortable with who I am. My grandkids sometimes paint my toenails, and that's all good. It's so I would challenge that view. In fact, I'm asked to define man and what a man is, and I find it far easier to define what I believe a real man isn't. A real man doesn't perpetrate domestic violence. A real man doesn't abuse people. So that, to me, that's easier. And anything other than those things you don't do, that's open slather. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, if I know in my own life, I've grown up in a very male-dominated home with a brother, a very dominant father, and that was the model in which I grew up. And it wasn't a lot of encouragement to discuss, share feelings, emotions, and all that. And then having really grown up, and I always say I grew up when I had my two daughters, and then grew up in a household with my wife and my two daughters, and the energy very different. It kind of gave me a bit of an insight into what sets us up for failure as men on an emotional and mental health basis.
Yeah, I don't know what is. I was just reflecting then on my father was in World War II. He was he met my mum in England. He was in the RAAF. He virtually never talked about the war, never said anything about it. And it was this thing that you didn't express your emotions. And I don't know if it's just within our culture. I think it's probably more in our culture. I think some of the other cultures, like, Italians or whatever, that there's far more likelihood to share what we're really feeling. And it's a huge weakness within our culture. But I think that's getting better. With these, I mentioned the peer support group, which I go to. And often there's tears there, but there's a bunch of men who are on my team. We share, we support one another. We say what's really going on. Yeah. I'd love to see that that continue and grow and around this open sharing, I think it would help address a lot of the issues we've got within community. Domestic violence is one of the key things, but if someone's feeling that, but they feel they can talk to other people about that and not be judged, and it could be one of the key things around prevention. So I'd love to see this more open, honest communication, particularly amongst men. But I don't remember my dad ever saying "I love you." Never doubted it from my mum. Never, but it wasn't the thing. But all of my kids, and I've got 12 grandkids. All of my 12 grandkids know that I love them, and I say it, and hopefully I demonstrate that as well. I share my vulnerability with them, and I'm seeing they're more likely. It's a long way to go. They're more likely to follow that.
Another aspect that I've noted in my own journey is the social support networks that women build up around them and that men build up around them. It's quite a different story there too, isn't it? Social support.
Yeah, I think women, we're going to generalize here, women will get together for no other reason than getting together. For men, often there's got, like it's sport, there's got to be a reason that's happening. And you see that, so I played tennis for over 60 years. And the guys who get up and we'd have this social tennis or competition tennis. When one of them gets injured, they just wouldn't turn up. So that banter, that post-match banter that was going on would just stop. And I believe that a lot of people, particularly high-profile sporting identities, struggle because a lot of their identity came from the sport, then pull out of it, and it's a real challenge for them because they're not getting that social connection. That they're not doing the thing that you said that women are more likely to do.
No, I know. And the other one is also fatherhood. Fatherhood, like when I reflect on my daughter's experience, even as a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old, there they were nurturing, even though we didn't encourage any gender stereotypes. They were there practicing nurturing and all this, while my nephews, who were a similar age, were out making toy guns out of anything they could get their hands on. And so something, and so when we find ourselves in parenthood, in fatherhood in particular, we're really challenged. It's an education again, isn't it?
Yeah. I remember one of the insane things I once thought was girls do what you just suggested and boys also do what you suggested because of the way they're brought up. But there's as soon as you have kids, there's no doubt at all that in general, I'm always that they go down this path. Can I make a comment as well? Like I found fatherhood incredibly hard, far harder than grandparenthood. And when you think about it, women, mothers, are prepared for motherhood. They go through a whole bunch of physical changes, chemical changes. There's a lot of things happen. For men, none of that happens. All of a sudden, there's this baby there, and you it's like, and often the mother's changed as well. The relationship can sometimes change.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. And I guess you can look at my father's model, which was almost hands off and a lack of emotion, a lack of authenticity. And he was always working like 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table. So there was a lack of that connection there, which you're trying to address later on. But I think there's an important need for fathers to get a lot more support and to someone to go and ask the questions to. And it just occurred to me, most of the young kids I mentored at school came from broken families. Most of them never had a male role model. So we've got arguably an absolutely critical role that's often not being fulfilled to the detriment of the kids and society. And even if they are there, it's just such a hard role to do.
Hi, Dr. Ron here, and I want to invite you to join our Unstress Health community. Now, like this podcast, it's independent of industry and focuses on taking a holistic approach to human health and to the health of the planet. The two are inseparable. There are so many resources available with membership, including regular live Q&As on specific topics with special guests, including many with our amazing Unstress Health Advisory panel. Now, we've done hundreds of podcasts, all worth listening to, with some amazing experts on a wide range of topics. Many are world leaders. But with membership, we have our Unstress Lab podcast series, where we take the best of several guests and carefully curate specific topics for episodes which are jam-packed full of valuable insights. So join the Unstress Health community. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, click on the link below or just visit unstresshealth.com to see what's on offer and join now. I look forward to connecting with you. So there's two parts to this. One is the mentor, somebody requiring mentoring, but there's the person providing the mentoring. Are they called the mentee? No. Well,
okay.
What's the relationship terminology?
So the mentor, in the case of mentoring men, the mentor is a volunteer bloke who goes through a training course and provides their time and listening ear to another bloke. And we call them mentees. It's like me, someone reaching out to actually just get that relationship where they can start to share what's going on in their journey. And they meet often. I used to think it had to be at a coffee shop or something like that. But then I've realized for a lot of men, it's too confrontational. Where there's emotion, I don't like people seeing me cry. So we go for a walk. Or it could even be virtual. Like I'm mentoring through Mentoring Men, a young guy in WA, amazing young guy, just brilliant, just a brilliant guy. But I'm also mentoring someone in Johannesburg, not through Mentoring Men. So, and I love doing that. I get as much or not more out of it than they do. Ron, can I share a story? Is that
absolutely?
Yeah. I mentored a young guy in 2015 in Sydney. And he had an incredibly high truancy rate. And we just chat about sport. And, there's an okay relationship. Early on, when I turn up to school, often he'd wag it, as we call it. And then later on, he was always there and he picked different days he was going to wag. And that was the end of we did 2 terms of mentoring. That was it. Forgot all about it. No, not forgot all about it, but there's no interaction. Last year, I had a phone call from the mentoring organisation, Raise, and they said this young guy had reached out to them asking if he could contact me. Sure. And so I said, here's my number. We caught up for coffee. He wanted to tell me the impact that mentoring had on his life. He'd been, the voices around him told him he was heading for jail. He had no future. He saw no benefit of school. There's a whole bunch of stuff I wasn't even aware of. And he's now a carpenter. He's studying to be a master builder. And I actually ran a men's breakfast at my place a couple of weeks ago, and he came along to the men's breakfast. And I'm getting emotional now.
Yeah, I feel emotional hearing it.
To see this young guy who was, in fact, he did a promotional video for Raise. If people want to check, his name is Ehrlich, A-L-E-C. He had 62 days off and that went to 2 the next year. And it doesn't get any better than helping another bloke or young man in life. And just all of what I've done, the sacrifice just for that one person would have been worth it. But how many are out there? And we never know. Like I had no idea. I'll tell a funny story. We turn up there under Raise. You might have 12 or 15 mentees, school mentees, and 12 or 15 mentors turn up. And they set up a circle of chairs. They call this the jitter session. And all the kids sit together. They're all nervous. So all the mentees, and you come in and all the mentors sit together. And they they play this game to try and mix up the group. So it's sort of like musical chairs. They take a chair away and someone goes in the middle and they might say, everyone with a blue jumper on, like what you've got on. So everyone with a blue jumper has to get up and find another chair, and they all and it mixes. So I was one of the ones up the centre in the middle. So I got up. I said, everyone who loves AFL, and not one person got up, and they all thought it was hilarious. And the young guy, Ehrlich, he said, "Oh, gay AFL," and that was the start of this relationship there. It's you learn a lot through this process. I could write a book about the lessons I learned from these young guys. And so if anyone's listening to this, you want to give back, you want to get some fulfillment, become a mentor, either for kids or through mentoring men or something like that.
And how did the course you put them through is a short self-paced course, or is it what does that look like?
So it's a 2-day course. There's a number of activities, so there's a lot of learning, but the primary aim of the course is to help men identify their own capability to mentor. So it gets into things like mirroring, paraphrasing, there's case studies. The biggest lesson for me was on the second day, and I thought, when I saw the course, so I had an input into the course, I didn't develop it. And I had this thing called a talking circle. The guy gave these rules. There was an object that was passed around from the people in this group, and you're asked to share exactly what you're feeling. And I thought, this is going to suck. I don't want to do that. And fortunately, I wasn't first. I remember the very first course in November 2018. First guy, I missed my dad. His dad had passed away, and the thing is, no one interrupts. You've got this object, you just say whatever's on. There's no judgment. Next guy, I can't get access to my kids. My mum gambled away our house. And then by the time it came to me, okay, here's what's going on. So that was that standout around vulnerability and these guys, because trust had built up over the first day. And I went to probably the next 15 run-ins of that course until they said, "Hey, you don't need to turn up anymore." But it just built such empathy and connection for me. And so that was the nature of the course. There's some fun exercises as well.
Yeah. I think these courses around the volunteering have so much to offer you as an individual doing it. I mean, in my own case, I'm just became an ethics teacher at my local primary school and did a 4-module program on that. And it has improved my interaction with my grandchildren so much. Like I now no longer have all the answers for them. I rather go, wow, that's just so interesting. Why did you say that? And does anyone else want to add anything to that? And it just changes the whole dynamic. So I can imagine this mentoring thing, course and program and opening up would have such a positive impact on the mentor, let alone the mentee.
I think a default position for many men, when someone talks about a problem, we immediately go into solution mode. And often people are just telling us because they just want to share their situation. And a benefit of the workshop, we realise that's not what you do. In fact, if you do that, you then create a dependency that, every time I've got to go and talk to Ron and he's going to tell me what to do. But there's power in someone can actually speak what they're feeling, what they're going through, and know they're being hurt. Very often the answers become clear to themselves. And, one of the questions I ask, it could be Ron, if you share you're going through something, I said, well, Ron, if a mate of yours is going through your experience, the experience what you're going through now, what suggestions would you make to them? What advice would you give? And it's sort of like they start to clarify, and so it's rare that I would give advice. I may share some of my own experience. So I just thought of a very funny story that happened with one of the young girls. I share it.
Sure, share again.
So this guy at one of the high schools, he told me how much he liked this girl, but he wasn't sure what to do, and did he buy her flowers or whatever. So I immediately, because I related to this, I was incredibly shy at high school, so I started going into all the things that I experienced at the same age. And I must have spoke for about 5 minutes. And then he said to me, Ian, that's great, but we're here to talk about me, not you. And I just cracked up.
Yeah.
And that same kid, though, said something incredibly powerful to me one day. He said, Ian, I see the school counsellor. I said, yeah. He said, I'd rather talk to you than the counsellor, which blew me away because you've already heard me talk about my failings as a mentor. And I said to him, why is that? He said, the counsellor sees me because that's his job. That's what he's paid to do. And here's the lesson. I know you're a volunteer and you were here because you care about me. And it's a huge advantage that the mentors have. There's no ulterior motive. There's not a financial thing or whatever. They're there because they want to make a difference in someone's life. And even though you mightn't say the best thing, and it's I'm certainly not the world's best mentor, but the fact that you would turn up and you're there and you care, it's more important than anything else.
It's interesting too, reflecting on the art of conversation. And to use a tennis metaphor, I think one of the things that the problem with men, particularly when they do talk, is they play a serve, rush the net and put it away for a winner game, whereas women tend to enjoy standing on the baseline and rallying. And I've often used that metaphor to describe the difference between the way men and women discuss things.
Yeah, it's like, we've got to get to the answer as quickly as we possibly can, and let me solve your problem for you. And sometimes what people say initially is their problem is not their real problem. That's not that. There's other things behind that. It's just something there. And one of the changes I guess I've learned when I started mentoring men, I had this attitude that the whole objective was to train equal number of mentors to the number of mentees in the program. And interestingly, it was far easier to train mentors than it was often to bring mentees in for the reasons you were talking about before. But what I've seen now, and I've spoken to the new CEO of Mentoring Men about this, I believe our focus should be to train as many men through this our workshop as we can, hundreds of thousands, regardless of whether there's a Mentoring Men provider mentee. But then in the interactions we have, they've recognised the skills that they've got. And in the work environment, with the neighbours, with the family, with the friends or whatever, and it's, you've obviously picked up for this conversation, I talk a lot, but all of a sudden I'll be in interaction and it's, Ian, shut up, put on the mentor hat and just be quiet and listen and focus and maybe ask a couple of questions. And I'd love to see, said hundreds of thousands of men in the community who had that awareness to actually to listen. There's a lot of people out there struggling. I used to think everyone had it together, and I now realize the vast majority of people don't have it together. And if we've moved away from the village, we've moved away from most kids growing up with the male and female role models to, unfortunately, that's far more often not the case. But if we're in tune with that and we realize that, within our neighborhood or whatever, I'd love to see that happen. More and more people go through this free mentoring workshop.
Well, the whole idea of asking questions and listening to answers, Ian, I can tell you, having done 600 podcasts now, it's an excellent way of practicing that on a regular basis. Here's another question for you, because another thing that you're passionate about and that you've instigated is Kintsugi heroes. And I think I'm right in saying Kintsugi is a wonderful metaphor for what it is it actually addresses. But I wondered if you might share with us what is Kintsugi and what are Kintsugi heroes?
So Kintsugi is that Japanese art form where broken pottery is put back together. And I'm going to hold up, there's that one Japanese Kintsugi master in Australia, and I went to a workshop in Sydney 3 weeks ago. So this is my handiwork. So broken pottery is put back together using a precious metal like gold, and not so much with my piece, but when you do it, the end result is far more beautiful, far more valuable than what the original piece was. And it's a metaphor for the lived experiences that we go through. we help people reframe how they see that adversity, see the power, see the strength, see the knowledge, that ability to help other people through that. So Kintsugi Heroes, we record people's stories, overcoming adversity stories, around every type of adversity. Our very first one was around grief. The guy shared about the death of his wife and the ongoing experience he had with that. We cover trauma with bushfires, floods, domestic violence, physical disability, mental illness, any sort of adversity theme. And then we publish those stories via various means. So we have video and audio podcasts. We edit them for radio broadcasts, so they're broadcast nationally on the Vision Australia National Network. We produce books. This is the very first book we did, which is around the stories of people impacted by the Black Summer bushfires in the Alpine area of Victoria. This is a recent book we did around people impacted by the floods in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. We did our first photographic exhibition. We did shown at Kirribilli Neighbourhood Centre. It was around social housing. Incredibly powerful exhibition of the residents of Greenway. And you walk in, there's this powerful portrait, and there's a QR code. When you click on the QR code, that person starts telling you their story in their own words. We just produced our first short film around the relationship between animals and our mental health. This amazing story of a young girl at 5 years old went to bed and woke up 100% blind. And then the role of a pet dog to encourage her out of the bedroom, and she rides horses now. She lives out at Picton. Amazing story, and we've got a number of those lined up after that. And we've got this huge event, taking a big risk, called Podstock, which we're running at Wodonga in Victoria. In fact, I'm heading down there this week, and it'll be a 2-day storytelling event. We've booked the major venue, the Cube in Wodonga, as well as the art gallery next door. And the idea is we'll have concurrent sessions going in both auditoriums with panel discussions around every type of adversity theme. So I'd love to see this become an annual event that travels around to regional areas and just encourages all the things we talked about before, people sharing, supporting each other, open conversations. So we just finished a project around connecting seniors to help address loneliness and isolation in the Hornsby area. And we ran a multicultural dinner, and the place was packed. And we centered on food and stories. So we had Indian people dancing and Indian food. Then we had Spanish people dancing and sharing their stories, and then paella, and then Ukrainian food and Ukrainian storytelling. And the feedback we got was just fantastic. It helps address some of these, I guess, the challenges that people have sometimes, the uncertainty, the ignorance, the lack of awareness of other cultures. And then we run a couple of events, and we've set up a community choir now that runs out of Thornlea. And because it's another great way of connecting. So it's constant learning experiences. And the reason for why I wanted to do this, as a teenager who lacked confidence, self-esteem, I shared that before, I later saw the power of books, of stories like the Nelson Mandela type stories to inspire me, give me some confidence to move on. And I thought, here's a really good idea. This is in August 93. I wrote to 3 community leaders to let them know about this idea. And back then it was a printed book, but to get people to share their stories, and that would give the Ians of the world's hope and inspiration. And one of the guys I wrote to was Dick Smith, the well-known entrepreneur. And he sent me back a handwritten note, and it said, Ian, this is a great idea. And then he added, you do it. And so I sat there for 30 years, and obviously the technology's changed, but now we're doing it. And it's incredibly exciting. So I love the journey.
Because this whole idea of the not just the social connection, but sharing not just a story of adversity, but overcoming adversity, is that social connection, tragedy or challenge, and inspiration. It's a wonderful combination.
Yeah. This young guy reached out to me a week or so ago, and he's studying journalism and law, and he wanted to do an article on someone in the mental health space. And he came around and recorded, asked me some questions and took some photos. But through my vulnerability, he just stopped at one point and then started to tell me about this 6 years of intense bullying he had at school, being held down on this school oval by a dozen guys, and the trauma and not being able to talk to his parents about it, and only coming to surface when he was crying on the bus. And it went to the school welfare person, then the embarrassment when they brought in the principal, and then further embarrassment where they forced each of these bullies individually to come in and apologise. And then post-HSC to be going to a school function where they randomly allocate kids to tables, and they randomly allocated the main bully sitting next to him at the table. Now, in this discussion where he shared this, you could see the impact, and he was in a really, really low place at that point. He's kicking goals. I said to, and I mentoring hat on, just listened to him. In fact, later on, I sent him an email just telling him how impressed I was with him, and I just saw an amazing future. But one of the things I said to him, how would it have been if someone else who'd had a similar experience to you had shared their story with you, and that you get through this, and there's going to be this? He said it would have been absolutely brilliant. So these stories, and there's some tough stuff. I mean, sexual abuse comes out in a lot of these stories, and it's horrendous. But having someone else gone through that stuff can make a huge difference. So that's, it made a difference for me, and mine was relatively minor compared to the huge stories that these other guys have.
Because I guess it's not just people feeling isolated and lonely in life now, but when something like that happens to you, feeling like you're the only one that it's ever happened to, that is a huge liberation, isn't it?
Yeah.
To know that you're not.
It's illogical, but you're right. It's like when no one else has had this before, no one else has felt this. I'm an ambassador for a group called Parents Beyond Breakup, which is predominantly dads going through relationship breakdown. And the suicide rate of men to women is about 3 to 1. When the men are going through separation, it's about 12 to 1. It's one of the reasons, I think, for some of the horrendous things that happen. But these men think, well, I'm the only one who's experiencing this. But through this group, and they run their own peer support groups, it makes a huge difference. My dream, how good would it be if every community at the local library or the community centre, whatever, once a week, a group of people got together, maybe with a facilitator, and listened and shared stories and bring back that village concept. So instead of being these isolated pillars where I'm thinking we're the only ones to experience this, actually realise that there's a lot of wisdom and that out there and shared experiences if we just listen.
Well, I mean, for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, that's all we had. Sit around and talk and tell each other's stories.
Yarning, we'd call it in Australia. How much could we learn from our Indigenous Australians around things like this? Yeah.
I know. Well, it's a theme that I often do say, that I believe we have so much to learn from our ancestors, our First Nations people, about connection and respect for people and country.
Absolutely, and even looking after the environment as well.
So, Ian, what you're doing, whose lives you're affecting is so wonderful and inspiring. I just wanted to take a step back and just ask you this one last question before we go, and that is, because we're all on a journey through life in this modern world. We're all individuals on that journey. What do you think the biggest challenge is for us as individuals on that journey?
The biggest challenge for me, there's 2 challenges, is work-life balance. And I get asked that, what's the secret? I've got no idea. I talked about all the positives, incredible fulfillment that I had on this journey, the lessons learned. But I've got a daughter who I love, and she said to me at one point, "Dad, you care more about these men than you care about your own family." Now, she's quite vocal and she was emotional at the time, but there's an element of, not an element of truth, but there's a reality. I was spending, sometimes making sacrifices around my family to get mentoring men done, and my wife would have similar views to that. So I guess that's been one of the bigger challenges. And I'm going through a health challenge as well at the moment. I got it's been through a cancer journey. Got diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma last week. So I'm incredibly upbeat, incredibly positive, and I'm loving what I do and continue to love what I do. So I don't know the answer. I've got no regrets about the things that I'm trying to do, and I see the impact that it has. But some people feel, some of the things I'm doing, I've got wrong, and I fully understand that, and they're probably right.
It's a fine balance. It's a fine line we walk, isn't it? In life, and I think a lot of people would share both of those stories, sadly, with you, in finding that balance in work life, and the ubiquitous diagnosis of cancer is something that has affected and continues to affect many people. I mean, I think the statistic is one in 2 men, 1 in 3 women over the age of 60 will get a diagnosis of cancer.
Yeah, and part of the challenge is, and I'm supporting a number of people through cancer journeys at the moment, is you are bombarded with almost invariably well-meaning people. And, the advice I've got is around diet, around exercise, go and walk barefoot on the grass, go and have a cold shower, don't eat meat, keto, take these supplements, surgery, no, radiation, no, and it's just, wow, how do you take all this in and then ultimately make a decision on this? And it's one of the real challenges. And I feel for people. And in my case, I'm going back on self-funded immunotherapy. But what do people do who can't afford that? And ultimately there'll be surgery, possibly surgery to remove this lump from my lungs. So, but again, you go on the waiting list to get that sort of stuff done. So it's just such a difficult road. I far prefer the prevention, like mental health. Let's go and prevent it. And maybe we should be eating less processed foods. Maybe we should be exercising more, and maybe we should be doing more meditation, and maybe more talking and sharing, story sharing. There's a number of things we should be doing. Maybe there should be less marriage break. Like, all these things lead to stress, which can lead to illness. So, I don't have the answers. I don't. I just
no, but that's certainly raised some important points for us to consider. And Ian, I just want to thank you not only for joining us today and sharing this story, but for all the wonderful work that you are doing, and all the very best going forward for you.
Rod, thank you so much for the opportunity to chat and for you to listen to all that stuff that I said. So thank you so much.
A pleasure. Well, we will of course have links to Mentoring Men and Kintsugi Heroes. I think the whole issue around men communicating their feelings, their emotions, much more than we do. I think when I look, as I mentioned, when I look at the way I was brought up and the way we've done programs before with Matt Delfino, and we might actually re-release that in this same week, The Man Cave, which is a wonderful initiative going into schools that are encouraging young boys to communicate their feelings and emotions. And rather than just crawl into a cave, as many men tend to do, when asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," they'll reply to their partner or their friends. "No, I'm fine, mate, no problems at all." And yet they are mentally crawling into a cave all on their own. Well, it's nice to know there are others in that cave that we can be talking to, and that it is so important for us to do that, to expose, to talk about our vulnerability and to share that with other men, but other people. It doesn't have to just be men, just to get used to sharing our emotions. Well, Mentoring Men is one of those. And of course, Kintsugi Heroes is full of very inspiring stories, and we'll have links to both of those. I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. Feeling stressed, overwhelmed? It's time to unstress your life. Join the Unstress Health community and transform stress into strength. Build mental fitness, from self-sabotage to self-mastery. And together, let's not just survive, but thrive. Expert-led courses, curated podcasts, like-minded community and support, and much more. Visit unstresshealth.com today. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.